Sublation Media, Diet Soap, and other kinds of viewers and
Doug Lain fans.
Oh, Doug Lain fans. Yes, that's right. Those are the
Doug Lain
three
fans.
Names on the channel. I'm going to have to figure out what to do with the name of the channel eventually, but at the moment,
I think,
that's what I've got.
Well, whatever, just pick one of them.
Yeah, but I want to make...
I don't think the name matters very much, but I think having 3 names or 2 names is stupid.
But the idea is if someone types in my name, they'll find the channel. If they type in Diet Soap, they'll find the channel.
Yeah, but because that already works because the URL is Doug Lain. So Doug Lain, it'll always work, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay. All right, well, we'll figure it out. I'll change it soon, and I'll change it for good. We're just about to turn the corner and really launch. But right now, today, what we're going to be doing, this is Stefan Bertram-Lee. I'm Doug Lain, and we're going to be discussing Soderbergh's hit movie, his biggest movie. No, his most forgotten film, Schizopolis. Which he made, I don't know exactly, I know what year he made it, but I don't know exactly what he had made up until that point. I couldn't tell you all the films that he'd made, but he had launched his career with a film called Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which was an independent small movie that did really, really well and made him into a Hollywood director. And then he made a few other films, including one about Kafka. I think it was called Kafka. And he wasn't as successful with these other movies. And so he kind of retreated and he went to his hometown and with some friends and very little money, he made Schizopolis. And a couple of facts about Schizopolis. Well, first of all, it's my favorite film. I mean, in a kind of trollish way, it's my favorite movie. Like when people ask me, what's your favorite movie? I say Schizopolis. I don't know if it's actually my favorite movie. Like,
it's a good answer.
It's a good, yeah. But I do really like it, and I like it because, as a fiction writer, I tend in this direction. I have to fight off this tendency to write kind of autobiographical, fragmented surrealism, and that's exactly what this is. And I hope that as a writer, I can be as funny as this movie is, because I think this movie is hilarious. But yeah, it's a mess of a movie. And a couple of facts about it that I find interesting now, which I didn't really think about when I selected this movie as one of my favorites, which was, a decade or more ago. Probably about 15 years ago, I watched it for the first time because I didn't see it when it came out in 96. It was playing at the movie theater right down the block from where I was living at the Art House Theater. And I was just like, oh, this looks like, this looks stupid and weird, and I don't want to see it. And I don't like Soderbergh anymore. He's a sellout or whatever. I don't remember exactly my reasoning at the time.
The budget here is like $50,000.
Yeah, right. Obviously, I was wrong, but I didn't see it at the time for whatever reason. I think I was turned off by the trailers, which featured a man running around with his penis dangling out, and I didn't. I was like, I've seen that before.
Part of the movie. That's one of the very, very minor subplots.
Yeah, it's like it's nothing really. It's just sort of a gag, but anyway, I saw it about 15 years ago and really liked it and decided it was my favorite film. And then recently I've thought about it some more in the last year or so, and it's all about a divorce. The whole movie is about his divorce. I mean, like, not only is that a part of the plot of the movie, but he stars in it opposite his then freshly ex-wife.
Oh, really?
They had divorced, and he hired her to play his wife in this film.
Oh, that's quite fun.
And that's his ex-wife and their actual daughter in the scenes at home, and Yeah, and
I think
so
this is probably the reason it didn't really appeal to me is that it's this particular kind of surrealism, which you mostly see in literature, but on film this time, where it's kind of like, it's about kind of a boring, conventional situation of which you read a lot about in non-genre literature of kind of a man having a struggle marriage or whatever, but you make it a bit surreal. But I'm very uninterested in kind of the original thing, so it's hard for me to connect to it really.
Well, tell me why you're uninterested in the story of a failed marriage. Like, what is it about the mundane in fiction that you don't find appealing?
Well, particularly in this case, it was because I didn't really find any of them. Well, obviously, I didn't find their marriage interesting because it starts off and it's already. Well, you're introduced to it via when they're speaking in. It's one of they have these throughout the film. If you haven't seen it, audience, they have these kind of dialogue quirks or whatever, where one person might speak in English, one person might speak in Italian, or they both speak in made-up language, or they both speak, well, not made-up language, with English words, but that are relevant to the meaning of the actual conversation they're having. Or they might speak in kind of perfunctory terms, as if they don't actually have the conversation. They'll say instead like podcast.
Well, why don't we do it? Why don't we do it as if we are having? So I'll say, trite but ponderous statement about the movie in question.
Brief explanation of the film plot. Summary of my negative thoughts.
Angry reaction, barely repressed.
Fear that he's going to take me off the screen like he did to Jen.
Temptation to follow through, unfunny joke.
so yeah, there's various quirks like this. Mm-hmm. And with the marriage relationship, it starts off, I think this is the first time it's shown, is when he goes back to his wife for the first time. And it showed from the very start that this is a perfunctory relationship in the sense that they're engaged. And also when he's outside, he's talking to the neighbor about fucking his wife.
Right.
And then he comes inside and has this completely explicitly perfunctory conversation with the wife, and you're like, oh, this is over before it began. And I don't know, kind of neither of the characters particularly appeal to me. The child is called just child in the subtitle, so they have no personality at all. Never named, which is another fun thing the movie does, though, which is call people like Hot Woman 2 or whatever,
right. My favorite name of a character is Nameless Numberhead Man.
Yeah, that was one of my favorites. I liked him. He was probably the most charismatic character. Right. I think the movie should have been about him. He was kind of like a funny guy who liked to fuck fat girls.
How's Diane?
Terrible. She's getting thinner every day. I mean, I really think the woman has betrayed me, because when I married her 9 months ago, she was fat as a house.
She was big.
Huge. She was big.
Yeah.
Nice. And now, 9 months later, she's skinny and getting skinnier. And I should have known. They say...
Her mom's thin.
Look at the mother.
Yeah, right.
They say that.
Right.
I looked at the father.
Yeah, because her dad's big.
Right. I looked at him and I thought... But no, the mother and her, they just sit all day, eating nothing, on purpose.
I'm formatting right now. It's formatting. Shit. Can you see this isn't on?
That's probably the main kind of character motivation I remember.
Right.
But then the other guy is kind of like, well, he's like Anderson from The Matrix or whatever. He's like there's not. I didn't really get it. Like he didn't appeal to me at all, apart from as kind of like a straight character to other people doing weird things, like the name.
I mean, he does have this long sequence where he's in the restroom looking at himself in the mirror and making odd faces.
Yeah, because I'm a child, so I did find that quite funny, but it didn't really build him as a character to me.
Right. Well, okay, I think that while it's true enough that these characters are not fully fleshed out, obviously in some cases that's made explicit. By the time I had decided, by the time I saw the movie and decided I really liked it, I had been married for over 10 years and had, let's see, 3 kids, maybe 4 at that time. And I had been down the road of no longer believing that my life was going to be like a science fiction movie and accepting it was going to be like some sort of realist novel, and
that's an interesting thing that also happened, which I thought it was going to become a significant part of the movie, but wasn't, was at some point during one of the cutaways to like kind of a person speaking to camera, like an academic or whatever. He talks about a particular kind of mental ailment or whatever, where people get this delusion where they interpret all the lives of all the events of their lives as if they're going to become a biographical movie. And obviously, as someone who is the subject of a biographical movie, I was like, oh, damn, this is going to be interesting. But then it didn't really come up again.
Well, also, though, you were watching a movie.
Oh, yeah, and it is like a meta-biographical movie at some point,
right,
with the kind of the exterminator. And that's one thing you'll have to explain to me. At what times is it linearly? Is it that is he one guy and it's obviously it's not linear, but the dentist, the exterminator, the office drone, who are all played by the same actor.
No, they're not. No, the exterminator is not played by the same actor. That's not.
Really?
No,
but,
right.
But he's the same.
You can't tell because he's wearing his goggles.
Yeah, I wasn't because I realized he was definitely meant to be a different character, but I couldn't tell if he was the same actor and they were trying to trick me or not.
No, it's not the same actor. So no, he is a different character, and that whole subplot with him, I'm not sure exactly how it connects or what it means exactly in relationship to the relationship with the story of the divorce, which is
it's hard obviously to get a grasp on that guy because I think he has of a percentage of character dialogue, his is the most that's some quirks. As in when he's talking to, most of the time he's talking in this made up language where he's speaking English words, but he's
the most unreal character.
Frog level. Elmo.
Nose Army.
Nose Army. Green Bay Shuffleboard.
Sanity Wedlock. Sodium Bypass. Cultured Turbine.
Jigsaw.
Jigsaw.
Smell sign.
Smell sign.
Yow.
Yeah.
He's like the least grounded character because he starts the movie as an exterminator going from house to house, supposedly looking for pests and bugs and things to exterminate them, but inevitably always seducing the woman of the house.
And it's like his bug searching is very perfunctory.
Yeah, right.
Like he just kind of just goes around the place and kind of knocks over shit and like
right.
No real pretense that he's actually exterminating, right?
Right. No. He's clearly there for sex, and he's the one who doesn't speak anything but nonsense, like beef diaper and things like that. He just says words that seemingly aren't random, but they're not random.
No,
they're like cut up poems or something.
They have the right cadence of real spoken sentences and like the right kind of syllable structure and stuff, but this you can't make. And there's no kind of like the I is or anything like that. It's just kind of like now.
Right. And
when he says the made up word for goodbye, it sounds like goodbye because he says it in the right intonation.
Right. And he is the character who about halfway through the movie is offered a better job on another movie.
Yes.
And so at that point he stops being the character that he's still dressed up like an exterminator.
That's the only time he speaks proper English is when he's out of character speaking to the movie.
The other movie people. Yeah, right. And they're like, we really love your work. We want you to be in our movie. And there's a great scene where he's in a trailer explaining to them that he's wanting to, I don't know, fuck the woman who brings the
No, he's saying, I want to get in touch with my feminine side. I want to get in touch with my wild side. And they're like, of course we'll do this for you, but we don't understand what you want. And he's like, obviously what I want to do is fuck the PA.
Right. Yeah, that's a great scene, and then he's put on these. He's given these action scenes where he just runs around beating random people up, and like at one point,
Or tearing off the labels of beds.
Off the mattresses. Yeah, tearing the mattress labels off.
Do not remove.
Right. Oh, he's a rebel.
Yeah, that's the police
so I think of that character as simply as comic relief and in sort of a meta-ironic character, but he also is the character that ends up being important to whatever kind of action plot line there might have been, traditional plot line there might have been in the movie, because he's the assassin at the end of the movie.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right. And so he's the lone gunman, depending on your point of view.
I think the funniest line in the film was after the assassination when the guy sat in bed and one of his PAs or whatever is like, oh, I think this is a movie of him fucking a wife. And the guy's like, oh, wonder what that's like.
That was a good line. So overall, I would say Schizopolis is a movie about alienation and the failure of communication and a feeling of being stuck. And it's a very cynical movie because the only ideology or approach to life that might claim some sort of progressive vision or meaning is this Scientology knockoff religion called eventualism.
Which you're explicitly told in the formation of how they speak that it's meant to be meaningless. He's instructed to make a speech which, while seemingly meaningful, is explicitly meaningless.
Right. It's meant to be the kind of thing that, seems profound, but immediately is forgotten.
You don't remember any of the particular words, but you get some kind of general fluffy idea in your head.
You get an idea in your head that you'll remember for the rest of your life. Right. Yeah. Eventualism. For a time I used to put on my bio, like on Twitter and places like that I was under the category of religion. If that ever came up, I would say I was an eventualist. And
it's funny, the most substantive kind of information that we find out about eventualism is through this guy on TV critiquing it, where he says like solipsistic, it's all about disconnection from the community and like responsibility and so on.
Right. He gets a toothache, that guy.
Lots of fucking people do.
That's true. Yeah. All right. So let's walk through the plot as much as one of the things that if you got the VHS tape of Schizopolis, one of the things that was on it was like a warning not to attempt to write a synopsis of the film.
You want to surmise it in chronological order or as it's shown on tape?
As it's shown, I think. Like in there's section 1, there's part 1, there's part 2, and there's part 3. So in part 1, we're shown the life of, well, first of all, it starts out with like a Cecil B. DeMille's parody where Steven Soderbergh is standing in front of a movie screen and explaining that
that was one of my favorite bits.
Yeah, like saying, look, the movie you're about to see is probably the most significant movie you'll ever see in your life. And if you find it difficult to understand, the problem lies with you, not with the filmmakers. No expense was incurred to bring you this movie. And what you should do if you're having difficulties is watch it again and again until you understand. And don't go to any of these bargain matinee half-price theaters. Pay full price each time.
Pay full price. Don't torrent it off the internet.
Do not torrent. Oh my gosh! Don't do that. That is absolutely forbidden. So it starts with that, and then what's the first scene? I've seen it so many times that what I did to prepare for this was watch the parts of the movie that I had sort of forgotten. But I can't remember because
in my head I've kind of reconstructed it in a more chronological way. So I can't remember. I mean, but most of the first section is the section which has the most of the office stuff.
Right, which is some of the best stuff in the movie, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And the language quirk in that section is the perfunctory language quirk.
Right. So it starts off with an advertisement.
The noun.
Right. And so it starts out with an advertisement for eventualism. And
right,
announcing that he's going to be appearing in person at the convention center or wherever.
Tickets available wherever tickets are sold.
Actually, he's going to actually appear at the Civic Sports. Let's see. What does it say? I'm going to. Hold on one second. At Civic Sports Memorial Performing Arts Theater Dome.
Nice.
That's where he appears. Yeah.
He's going to get dome with a dome.
Yeah. And so then it goes to, we see it's part one, and then he's driving, and then he's interviewing people about eventualism and how it helped change their life. And the first one.
Oh, yeah, and he interrupts a woman, I remember.
Well, he kisses a woman, and that's the first woman he interviews.
Wasn't that like a schizo moment? That didn't happen, right?
No, it didn't happen. It was just his fantasy. But she was talking about how she used to brush her teeth
every 15 minutes.
Every 15 minutes. Remember. And she almost lost her teeth, but then eventualism helped her stop. And then
many such cases.
Yeah, he fantasizes about kissing her, and her tooth falls out. And then one of his colleagues at work dies.
Yes, which gets him a juicy promotion.
Yeah, he gets promoted, but then he has to write the speech.
Another good section is kind of where the unnamed man is explaining to him why all the obvious reasons why Lester has died due to his lifestyle, and the principal character then flashes through how he's doing all of the exact same things as him.
Right. Yeah. Like a sedentary lifestyle, fatty foods, excessive masturbation, all these things, leading to an infarction. And so yes. And then we see Elmo, but the point is, like, at the beginning, there's also this idea that there's a mole and a spy.
The mole and the spy. The mole being the infiltrator and the spy being hired by the company to find the mole.
Right, exactly.
And it doesn't go anywhere in the end, I'm pretty sure.
Well, I think that the main character is the mole, or is he being offered the opportunity to be the mole?
Yes. Well, I mean, yeah, it does go somewhere, but it doesn't go anywhere. There wasn't at that point that they were talking a spy or a mole. Because the spy/mole, the mole is the unnamed man who only takes the job after being fired.
Well, wait, who is the mole?
In the end, the unnamed, because remember when the unnamed man meets...
Wait, the nameless numberhead man, you mean?
Yeah, he meets his fat GF and agrees to be the mole.
Oh, okay. I've forgotten about him agreeing to be the mole. Yeah.
That's why she comes over, because she's like, oh yeah, just sign this and we'll give you a check. And he's like, you're beautiful.
Oh, that's right. I remember that now. Yes, that's right. So at that point in the film, when they're saying there's a mole or a spy, there isn't yet.
Yes, unless I misunderstood the chronology, but I don't think so.
But
because the reason he needs to be the mole is because he's lost his job.
Right, but then he can't be the mole if he doesn't work.
But he can just give all the information that he knows already. He's a whistleblower. Right?
Well, I've seen this movie a bunch of times, and somehow that aspect escaped me. I got so distracted by the fact that he was hot.
By fat girls.
Yeah. He has this beautiful blonde wife, right?
Yeah,
who, of course, the exterminator has already had sex with by the time you figure that out. And actually, I think she was married to this the actress who played that role was like some famous director's wife or something. I forget who it was, but yeah. Anyway,
Oliver Stone?
Huh?
Oliver Stone?
Maybe. Let's see. I'm going to look up the cast.
Because at the end of the film they reference Oliver Stone.
Let's see. There's Catherine the attractive woman, Catherine NASA.
She's from NASA?
No, her name is Lanassa. She was in The Frozen Ground, Judging Amy, 2.5 Men, Big Love.
But who's her husband? Tell us about the man.
French Stewart and Dennis Hopper.
Okay.
Dennis Hopper. She was married to Dennis Hopper. At the age of 22, she married 53-year-old Dennis Hopper.
How did that go?
They divorced 3 years later.
Oh, wow, that's quick.
Well, and then he was dead shortly after that, I guess. No, he lived a while after that. But yeah, good for him. And then French Stewart, she married him. The guy from Third Rock from the Sun. And then she divorced him. And then now she's married to Grant Snow.
That is an old man, or
Grant Snow, he's from Melrose Place. And yeah, he's even older than I am, Grant Snow.
Yeah.
So she likes the older men.
You had your chance in the 90s.
Yeah. So anyway, I just got a message from Connor Kilpatrick on the screen. And, I will say, even though I'm on Twitch, I'll say he's not particularly pleased with the people who are publishing his novel. After I
don't know, there's no one watching.
There's one person watching.
Oh, is it? The mole or the spy?
Probably the spy. So the backup. Do you think that this movie Schizopolis is should be considered like something other than a realist film? Like it's not, or is there a science fiction element to this movie? Would be the question. Because I do think there's soul transmigration in the movie.
What do you mean with the guy and his doppelganger?
Right. There's a doppelganger.
Well, that bit was a bit I didn't understand at all.
They're both there. They meet in the parking lot.
Though it did lead to a very funny thing where he's like, I think I'm cheating on my wife with my wife or something along those lines.
Right. Oh my God, I'm having an affair with my wife.
Yeah.
So like he follows the dentist home. Mr. Munson follows the dentist version of himself. Like he's playing both parts to his house. And then in this moment of like, they make eye contact and he then has become the dentist. And like when he says, oh my God, I'm having an affair with my wife. And then when he goes into the dentist's office the next day, he has to kind of try to remember the name of his secretary. So I mean, there's this hint that the character has now shifted, like in a Lynchian way.
Did the brother plot go anywhere?
Yeah, the brother plot was why the dentist got killed.
Wait, the dentist got killed? Oh.
Yeah.
Maybe I saw that towards the end. I was telling you things from earlier. Now I just like missed whole.
Yeah, well, the dentist. Remember the dentist with the brother. The dentist's brother is a drug addict and is involved with the mob, and he asked him for $10,000, and he's like, "No."
Yes, and he's like, "I can get you like medical heroin." The guy's like, "No,
I can give you like Darfacet or something, some sort of like
He's like, I'm not Canadian. Or I'm not.
I said I'm not a housewife.
All right.
That's what he says. So it's basically offered him something along the lines of Valium. I can get you Valium in enormous quantities. It's like, I don't want Valium. So anyway, his brother leaves, and then the mobster shows up. And
8 hours, brother.
He says, 8 hours. Your brother, $10,000 or $15,000.
3. What if I can't get my brother? Do you still need the 15,000? The guy's like, yeah.
All 3.
And take.
And yeah, he takes his music. And so then, like in the course of that day, his whole life falls apart before he gets killed by that mobster at the end. Because like he falls in love, right? He falls in love with that woman and writes her an erotic letter. It's one of the funniest moments. Then she sues him for sexual harassment. Then he finds out that his accountant has run off with all of his money and all of his business partners' money. So he has no money. He's just been told he's going to be sued for sexual harassment. Yeah. And he walks outside and the mobster's there. And he says, has it been 8 hours? And he says, yeah. And then we see a scene where he's running back and forth on the lawn and in front of the dentist's office in kind of like a Benny Hill comic way, like back and forth, like he's being shot and turning around and going back and turning around and going back. And then he does get actually shot and he falls down comically. And then we're back with Munson again and that whole plot line. And we're back in his head. And then actually it's all told in the third section from the perspective of his wife.
Yeah, they redo those sections, and the quirk here is that the men in her life, they speak not English to her.
Right.
Which, you have to assume has something to do with kind of, I don't know what the theme was meant to be exactly, but, the foreign husband is speaking Japanese. And they just mentioned kind of the thing about they've sold New Hampshire got sold in the movie for $18 billion, and they were going to make it into a shopping mall. And they mentioned in the thing like, well, at least we didn't sell it to the Japanese. So I was wondering if it's like Japanese is meant to represent kind of business language and what she's trying to get away from, and then she's cheating on him with a guy, but also that she can't really understand him. And then she's cheating on him with the guy who then instantly betrays her for this other woman. And again, he can. The main thing is, again, she can't understand him, but she can. It sounds sexy. She again, just like her husband, she doesn't understand what he's saying, but at least it sounds sexy. And then you have the final French-speaking guy it's the same guy again, and I was like, oh, is that meant to be kind of like she can't understand it, but at least it's romantic.
I couldn't tell if we're witnessing the beginning of her affair with the dentist, or if we're witnessing a scene with supposedly a third man who was neither of the other two versions of her husband, who is just like a one-night stand.
And that's interesting because that section, they apparently meet and he's speaking French, and then in the next section he's speaking French again, so he's meant to be presumably the same guy in the same timeline, but the situation they're in is not some people I've just met at a coffee bar to maybe have some kind of fling, but rather she's laying on his lap with like a pillow between them and like a very intimate whatever, but in a kind of way that was very
kind of more loving kind of way. But you might do that after a one-night stand.
But it didn't even seem like because they were fully dressed in like the clothes they'd wore when they it didn't seem like they'd done anything. It seemed like they'd started off doing that.
Oh, maybe you're right.
But there was no in-movie signal that they'd had sex because they were dressed exactly as, I think they had their shoes on.
Yeah, okay.
They don't look at all ruffled. There's no signal at all. And maybe they were meant to be that, but there's certainly no on-screen signal that they've had sex.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I always interpreted it that they had, but that it'd be like that. Maybe it was the next morning or the next day, or I don't know. But no, you're right. It could have been right after the scene in the cafe.
Well, and also it seems like it's night in both scenes. Well, it's definitely night in the cafe, and it seems like it's night again in the end.
So, but when I was younger, loved metafiction, and I loved the absurd, and I loved writing stories which exposed that they were stories, and that's part of the metafictional thing. And I always thought that there was something radical, like politically radical, about writing these kinds of stories, even if there wasn't something political about the story itself. It's like I'm exposing how our reality is structured by conventions and getting to the reality. And then as I As I got older, I became less enamored with all of this, but I still sort of, by like as a habit, like a tick, I can't resist the metafictional kind of move. But this is like the ultimate version of that kind of thing. I actually wrote a story that was just as self-indulgent as this movie called Suburbs of the Citadel of Thought. And that got published, like it was the second professionally published short story I ever wrote. And I was like 27 years old or something when it, or 28. But so like the other reason I liked this was like, oh, this is a real director, a real film, and it's just as whack as anything I might have written. But I do still kind of feel like Schizopolis is not just about this personal dissolution of a marriage. It's not just about Steven Soderbergh's autobiography retold in a kind of like a dream, like that's the other thing. There's a dream logic to the film. It's not, it's unconscious processing of what happened to him rather than the literal truth. It's not just that. It's also like a cultural analysis. It ends in the mall, and he talks about his future and how she found someone who was more emotionally demonstrative and smarter and more successful than he was.
Handsomer, not successful.
Yeah, handsomer, smarter, more successful than he was, and more emotionally demonstrative as well. And then 8 years after that moment, after the time in the movie, he fell asleep on his way home from a wedding reception, and he fell asleep in a snowdrift, and he was frozen, and they didn't find him until spring, in which at that moment he was successfully thawed. So we're meant to believe that he survived that, in this telling. And he's sitting in the mall, and it's being filmed so that all the people walking around him are going at high speed. And he's moving very slowly, and he's not moving at all, really, just sitting there for hours. And I felt like, in 1996, there was this feeling like nothing was changing, that we were frozen as a culture. And later on, Mark Fisher talked about this, like a whole decade and a half later, that we would never escape the 20th century, and the culture was frozen and couldn't, it was nostalgic. I think all of that actually was overcome in the last, I don't know, decade. Like certainly since Trump, we're in a different moment than we were in 1996. But 1996 felt remarkably like 1986. Yeah. So anyway, do you think that there's a political, cultural aspect to this movie?
Well, I thought it would be a lot more about this Scientology outfit, and then it wasn't really. I guess what I was what a film I would have liked, an imaginary film I made up in my head before watching it, but having read a couple of lines of plot summary, is that it'd basically be Office Space, but Scientology. That'd be a cool film. Right. And then there was this kind of Scientology thing where obviously, you're kind of meant to conclude that these kinds of offers of a new life through these semi-self-help, semi-religious organizations are bullshit. But it doesn't, it spends maybe 20 minutes of screen time or something on this. And in the end, it doesn't really go very far. And then kind of reappears at the end when the guy gets shot, and then he doesn't die. And then it's like, I was like, oh, well, I don't know. I didn't get it.
Right. Well, it's absolutely the case that if you are coming to this movie thinking, I want it to be plotted with a clear arc and a character.
I mean, I knew it was going to be non-linear, but the thing is, it wasn't, all this stuff about kind of this organization, and then having the personal life connect to this organization and connect to this organization's practices, which should be like a systemic critique. It just kind of has one of the lines going through it being about this, but it's not like compared to the kind of the romantic line, it's not really, that's like, it's much smaller than the romantic line. And there doesn't seem to be, to me anyway, like a really, there wasn't like a drawing together between this is why this stuff is bullshit and this is kind of why, you know, Americans are getting divorced or whatever, you know, which presumably at the time was like a big booming phenomenon and had only become relatively common relatively recently.
I don't know. I think that in 1996, divorce, I mean, the Latchkey Kid thing was 20 years earlier. Kramer versus Kramer.
Oh, really?
You know?
It was that early in America.
Kramer, let's see. Kramer versus Kramer came out in 1979.
Yeah, it was 1980 was the kind of the peak, and then it was pretty stable until about 2005.
And remember, like technically in the story of this film, they don't get divorced.
Yeah, she just leaves him and then she comes back, or was that not linear?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say, but she doesn't get to leave him cleanly because the man she was going to leave him for is him. First of all, is him. Secondly, is in love with a woman who looks just like her and is suing him for sexual harassment and is killed by a mob boss at his office. So
UK divorce rates peaked in 1996. So
they did.
I had the wrong culture.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know when the peak was in the United States. Did you say it was 1980 is the peak was? Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, yeah, well, speaking about divorce, you know what's happening now is that gray divorces, people who are middle-aged, like my age, are getting divorced more.
That's interesting, Doug.
Yeah. Yeah. I found that out. I've discovered that fact.
We need to slowly drip feed hints of your personal life into the show, because after we did the Matrix movie, lots of the comments were like, wow, Doug's gave hints of his life. So interesting. And now you won't be getting any more of this episode. Tune in next week if you want to learn.
Yeah. You'll find out more next week. There was actually in the Twitch stream that I did with J-Reg, my son just like started revealing the personal bits of my life, which I would never have spoken of in public. Just
I mean that's like having children, right? They drop.
Yeah. He just dropped big bombs and the version of the conversation with J-Reg or Junior Egg that is on the channel.
J-Gay.
Or J-Gay. the version of that conversation on the channel has his big revelations cut. So you had to have been watching the Twitch stream.
Live.
Yeah. In order to see find out more about
no one was watching it live, right? Because you didn't get J-Reg to post or anything.
We did Twitch. We streamed that on Twitch, but no one was watching it. It was like we have two people watching us now.
Yeah, so, but I mean, if you got J-Reg to post it, or you got J-Reg to host it on his channel, or whatever, you could have.
Right? No, I didn't do that. No, no one knew it was going to happen.
That's for the best.
And he just showed up. I liked that. I enjoyed talking to him. It was, it was silly, but I thought it was interesting. Yeah, no, people. I mean, if people who follow the channel, and even going back to, Zero Books channel, will know like I've been divorced, and they know that much, and that I'm dating. Believe me, everyone knows that I'm dating through apps. I mean, I talk about that a lot. Like, and I used to even say at the end of videos, like, and you can follow me on Twitter, on Facebook, and look me up on Tinder. Yeah, right. So anyway, I do find the movie very relatable. And I am interested in the nuances and the kind of mundane aspects of the movie as I watch it again and again. But I tell you what is even better than the actual movie is if you get a chance to watch. It's on YouTube, I believe. It was for a while. the movie is shown with the commentary track from the director, Steven Soderbergh, interviewing himself for the length of the movie and saying things like, so a lot of people
talk about the scenes in question, or is it just like a full schizo of him just like chatting over the movie?
It's like him interviewing himself, and the interviewer is very skeptical and kind of insulting, and the interviewee version of himself is grandiose. And I do, a lot of people have said this is the most important movie ever made, and of course I couldn't disagree with that, and things like that. Things like that. But it's funnier. It's as funny as a movie, huh? What?
It's the most important podcast ever made.
This is the most influential podcast ever made right now, clearly. Yeah. And if people don't understand that, what they need to do is, first of all, we're going to only release this on Patreon, I guess, and they need to then go pay for themselves to watch it again, and then get one of their friends to a gift of Patreon so they can watch it and then discuss it with them, I think is probably the best way to go.
If you don't understand any of the YouTube videos, watch the video from the beginning to the end, and then click the X on your browser and then open it again so it counts as another view, and then watch it from the beginning to start again.
That's a good idea. And then go to Patreon, sign up, and send me a message and ask me what it means. And I'll explain to you what other videos we've made that you should watch in order to understand that this is my plan. So I feel as though like the young version of me would have thought that you were being rather pedestrian in your taste by saying, oh, I wanted it to be about the Scientology cult, and I wanted there to be at least some connection between the personal life and what happened institutionally, and for it to have meaning at the end. But I kind of am with you now, because I do a little bit more. I do feel like if you were going to deliver a real cultural critique of, let's say, Scientology or of just the corporate world, a movie like Office Space probably delivers that more succinctly without being ponderous and self-indulgent, and sort of, I don't know, there's something maybe very middle class about Schizopolis.
I mean, I'm very happy to have my taste be pedestrian. I want my taste to be common and completely in touch.
Right. Well, are those two things the same now? Having a common,
really. I mean, they're different things, but they're all related.
So having a common touch and being pedestrian in your taste,
because obviously you can be very in touch with people while having a very separate taste yourself, but there'll always be some kind of like disconnect within you, where, like, for instance, Doug might understand Marxism very well and he wants to tell Marxism to everyone, but there's still a voice in his head which is like, what about you make it a metafiction?
Right.
Well, that voice in my head doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah. Like for me, there's a voice in my head that says, why don't you make this a little more difficult and a little subtler, and, make it a little more ambiguous, and put a metafictional part in, and make it absurd, and make the character difficult to relate to. And and why do you make everyone...
Why don't you make the hero win?
No, it can't do that. The hero has to lose, and everyone has to be orange for a good.
And in the end, nothing really changes.
Right. In the end, nothing changes, and maybe you feel a little melancholy, and that's my radical act. So yeah, no.
Everyone who watches Stefan versus ISIS will immediately get on a plane and go to Syria. Unfortunately, it's so effective that half of them will join ISIS.
Oh, that's not good. Well, listen, we've recorded for 48 minutes. Is there something else we want to say about Schizopolis?
I guess we covered the film. We covered the three things I suggested to you that we should talk about, right?
The
film, the film's the theme, and any kind of broader. I mean, I guess.
Have you ever seen Sex, Lies, and Videotape?
No, I mean, I guess I wanted to say, like, do you think that there's movies like this nowadays, or do you think this is like a very, very 90s movie?
Well, I don't think it's just a 90s movie. I think it's very much borrowing from like a certain avant-garde tradition, but making it's a little bit more accessible maybe than some of the other avant-garde films that might be like this. But it does have
the
something.
audience shouldn't think that it's too crazy. Like, it's not.
No, there's lots of ways. I mean, look, the way to watch this movie is the way you would watch Monty Python's Meaning of Life.
Yeah.
Which is a series of sketches, which are maybe connected, maybe not. And maybe it's not quite as funny as Monty Python's Meaning of Life, but sometimes it is, you know? So yeah, it's accessible because it's funny and because it can be watched just for the jokes as like a series of disconnected sketches almost.
The fallacy that work under pressure results in a direct pipeline to creative genius, that divine inspiration can be conjured by, well, anything but the most mind-bending concentration. Now, this is the world of the poseur, the pretender, the fraud.
This is the worst piece of shit I've ever read. No, really. The worst. What have you been doing, Munson? Jacking off all day? Why did you give me this?
You said you wanted to see a draft.
You're absolutely right. I said I wanted to see a draft. I didn't want to see a misdirected, panic-induced, cretinous little piece of shit.
We did things which aren't massive by themselves, but were in the news, basically. And then we did Star Trek to see something that isn't in the news, but it's big anyway. And then today is just something that isn't big and isn't in the news.
Right. And we'll see how it goes.